Hey everybody, welcome once again to my monthly hangout with my Patreon patrons. I just realized right before we went on the air, and I swear to God this wasn't planned, but with me this could happen on pretty much any given day. I'm wearing my Batman shirt and drinking from my Batman mug, so it's like my mug and
Ooh,
I are twins. Um,
cosmic convergence.
exactly. How
Let's
do you
be honest.
explain
There's like an 80% chance that happening, Steve.
that? It happens. It happens like every third day, honestly.
Hmm.
How do you explain that? So anyway, how are you guys? How is everybody?
Doing well. I
Doing
had
well
a
here.
I had a real treat last night because of a deal I've got with the Cleveland Orchestra because I'm a subscriber. We got really we got half off ticks to see the Orpheus Chamber Orchestra,
Ooh.
and they were performing four of the Brandenburg Concerti of Bach.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
literally 4 rows back, stone dead center, and it just, I mean, for the orchestra, you'd never want to be there because the sound would be too overwhelming, and it doesn't really come into focus until until you're back, like about 2/3 of the way back out of the Blossom Pavilion. But for a chamber ensemble, perfecto. And these guys, they just make it so effortless and so just absolutely gorgeous, and just one of those great treats.
I remember the Brandenburg concertos were some of the first classical music that I ever got into and could actually identify. Like I actually knew what I was listening to
Hmm.
because when I was a kid and a teenager, like classical music would be playing and it all just sort of blended together. And then it wasn't until I got into like middle school and high school that I started developing an ear for it. And I like, oh, there are actual compositions. And so when I was like a teenager and I would write stuff like either writing for my own personal enjoyment or writing like for stuff for school, I would write to classical music, and I had a CD set of Mozart and a CD set of Bach, and that was like my writing music. So that was like some of the first classical music that I ever actually got to really love.
My parents were really slick because they got me, I still remember to this day, a box of yellow 45 RPM records that had everything from the Bory, from the Handel Water music, to Gounod's, what was it, the Funeral Dirge for a Marionette, which you know better as the theme to Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah, yeah.
Part of the Polovetzian dances, which again you know better as Stranger in Paradise. Take my hand, blah, 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 and just stuff like that. There was a record that I had that told the story of the Trojan horse and used Prokofiev's Love of Three Oranges as the backdrop music. And there was a story of Aladdin, which was, of course, told with, predictably, Rimsky-Korsakov's Scheherazade. And, I mean, just stuff that just got utterly stuck in my head before I couldn't have been 8, 9 years old, and some of this stuff was just embedded in my head. And I suppose I could say out of that I became both a music lover and an audiophile who literally almost probably has about as much money in my sound system as I do in my car. But, I'll tell you, I mean, 50 years later, I wouldn't trade it for anything because it's just been so enriching. That and having the Cleveland Orchestra in my backyard, it's been great.
Yeah, for all of its shortcomings that I have occasionally detailed in my videos, Hagerstown is home to the Maryland Symphony Orchestra.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, and they play semi-regularly at the Maryland Theater, which is this beautiful old, like, 100-year-old theater in Hagerstown. That's one of the jewels of the town. It's one of our few things we can brag about in Hagerstown is the Maryland Theater and the Maryland Symphony Orchestra, and that's one of the few really artistic perks to living in this area is that you can go pretty much on a regular basis and catch the Maryland Symphony Orchestra, and they've had a
That's
really,
no small perk.
yeah.
I mean,
It's really nice. I was thinking about because now when I write when I'm writing stuff for the YouTube channel, the last couple months I've just been listening to the Hamilton soundtrack, and that doesn't work because I get distracted. I start listening to the songs instead of writing. So maybe I should go back.
Yeah.
I should go back to the classical music.
Yeah,
Well,
I can't listen to anything with lyrics in it. So
No,
well,
my writing music is always very rich because of the tempo.
Yeah,
yeah.
you start singing along in your head, and then all your writing time goes out the window.
Yeah, exactly. Because this coming week is my heavy week for writing, because I'm going back into production with the Steve and Stuffy videos, so I'll have to write that. I'll have to write the next script for that tomorrow and finish it up Tuesday, and then this is also the week when I write Facepalm 5 and the 5 Things videos, and that's Thursday. So Thursday is a really big writing day, and it's like I wake up, I get started early in the morning, I'm writing at like 8-9 o'clock in the morning, and then I'm still going at like 10 p.m. I mean, I take breaks in between, but still, it's like I still have work to do in the evening, and it's because I put on music to write to, and I end up just listening to the music and not doing any work.
Hey, Steve, don't feel bad. I mean, I'm currently at least trying to read Solomon Volkov's testimony, which are supposedly the memoirs of Dmitri Shostakovich, and I'm just, for reasons I won't get into here because I'll dominate the whole thing, and I'm just fascinated with him. But I mean, I try to listen and read at the same time, but most of the time the music just grabs you, says, "No, you're gonna put your attention." The music just seduces me, and I mean, especially if I'm listening to a piece I dearly love, like the Shostakovich Fourth or Fifth, or the Prokofiev Fifth, or the Rachmaninoff Symphonic Dances, which I dearly love. I mean, some of that stuff is just, forget about it. It grabs my ears and says, "You're going to listen." And
yeah, it's funny that you mentioned Shostakovich just now, because I was reaching mentally for the name of somebody, because I was thinking when we started talking about classical music, I linked up with this Facebook post that somebody posted last night and tagged me in about Stanley Kubrick, and of course one of the great geniuses of Kubrick was the way he could use music, and he used music so well in his last film, Eyes Wide Shut, which a lot of people hate, but I think is great. I could watch Eyes Wide Shut pretty much any time. As he used music so memorably, and for the opening and closing titles, he used Shostakovich.
I'll have to watch that.
Yeah, he used Shostakovich's Jazz Suite.
Oh,
yeah, da 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 da, and it's just so perfect. And then he also used Georgi Ligeti for like this really stabbing, musical sting, like just this really harsh piano note would strike at key moments in the movie, and it's almost the use of the music is almost more memorable than anything else in the film.
Yeah. I learned about Ligeti, of course, courtesy of 2001, where they used Atmospheres and Lux Eterna, and I think at least one other cut in that. And I remember thinking, for modern music, how incredibly listenable it was. And I mean, to the point where I got the soundtrack, and I enjoy the Ligeti as much as I enjoy the Blue Danube or any of that other stuff.
Yeah, that's one of the.
Half my iPod is soundtracks right now.
Hey Martin, I didn't see you come in. Hi Martin.
I have my share of soundtracks. I mean, I'm an absolute Zimmer nut. I mean, I've got Crimson Tide. Don't have Interstellar yet, but I've got Inception and Gladiator, and those are just smoking. I love that stuff.
I used to be a total movie soundtrack nerd. I used to buy the soundtrack to like almost every movie I saw if it was available. I mean, I don't do it as much now. I think like in my Amazon account I have a couple of soundtracks, just the more memorable ones. But that's like one of the fringe benefits of being a movie person, is that if you watch enough movies, you discover so much great music. Like I probably wouldn't have known who Arvo Part was unless I had seen the movie Jerry, directed by Gus Van Sant, starring Casey Affleck and Matt Damon. They used Arvo Part as the score for most of that movie, and I had never heard his music before, and me and Ashley both fell in love with it and just really loved this music. And we ended up playing a piece of it at our wedding.
Wow.
We played an Arvo Part piece, and we, I had no idea who he was until I had seen that movie. So
Well, it's interesting because one of my pet peeves with James Horner is how much he used to steal. I mean, with Khachaturian, I mean, he used Khachaturian's Gane Ballet Suite at least a couple of times. He stole from the third movement of the Shostakovich Fifth Symphony. That was in Clear and Present Danger. The Death of the Enterprise is almost a note-for-note steal from Romeo and Juliet, Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet. But I'll tell you what, I've played them side by side, and there's no getting around the fact that that phrase, that moment, absolutely works. You're just watching the Enterprise streak across the sky and seeing Kirk look up at that and going, "Oh shit."
Yeah, that's. There are some Star Trek fans who will say that the destruction of the Enterprise hit them harder than the death of Spock. You know what I mean? And it was like a really beautifully played moment. I mean,
well, they're both icons.
Yeah, and the Enterprise didn't come back. I mean, they got a new one, but
as much as everybody takes shots and deserved shots at Star Trek V.
Yeah.
That one moment when Kirk says, "I had a brother once. I was lucky I got him back."
Yeah.
And it just struck me as being completely honest.
Yeah. And then someone else pipes up and says, "Didn't you have another brother?" and you didn't get him back, did you?
Oh well.
What about Sam? Sam. I was young. I barely knew him. Yeah, you're right.
Well,
when me and Jason talked about Star Trek V on Late Seating a couple of weeks ago, that was something that, because for all of the really just goofy, ridiculous stuff in that movie, there are certain moments here and there that are like just classic Star Trek moments, that you can kind of pick out and be like, okay, yeah, the rest of the movie is just shit, but it has one or two little scenes where you're like, oh, that's it, like that's why I watch this stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's like what I was telling you before with 2010 Odyssey 2. I mean, even like the first scene with Mosevich and Haywood Floyd, and they're playing their game of truth, and then later on when Floyd says, "I'm going on the flight," and it just everything sort of comes to almost a dead stop, and then there's that just marvelous little pulsing synthesizer theme that sort of says, okay, it's not utterly wrong here, but we've got a problem here. And God, what was the name of the guy who played that? I can't think of his name now. Floyd.
Oh, in 2010?
Yeah.
Wasn't it Roy Scheider?
Roy Scheider.
Yeah.
And and the kid says, "Isn't Mommy hungry?" And he says, "No, I don't think so." It's just, again, it's wonderfully quiet, and it's played exactly as it needed to be.
2010 is another kind of underrated movie. I mean, I don't think it bears comparison with 2001, but I think they're so different.
You might as well compare apples and kumquats.
Yeah.
But then I think immediately the scene after that, when he and the kid are talking about his going to Jupiter and going under cryostasis or whatever have you, and the way he described it is exactly how you describe it to like a 4 or 5 year old kid, and it's just one of those wonderful moments that I think just works like Topsy. I really get a kick. It's what I'd want to do if I was going to do that. That's what I want to give my kid.
Yeah, it's really cool when you look at certain films and you see like the music, either the choice of soundtrack, like they choose a pop song or something, or the choice that the composer makes to score a particular scene, and they do something that like you would never have expected them to do. That it goes completely against what because I know when I would write screenplays, I would never, unless there was a piece of music that I needed for like that was going to be music in the scene, like diegetic music. I never thought in terms of, well, how could we score this? You know, like what would the score be in this scene? I always found it very difficult to imagine. Whenever I would write scenes and screenplays, I would always sort of play them in my head, and they would be without the score. You know, it would just be whatever was happening. And then like a composer comes in and just adds this new layer to it that you would never even imagine. And then afterwards, it's like you can't imagine it without it. You know, it's one of those really great things about that collaborative process where you hand it off to somebody and you say, hey, I need, you know, go ahead, score this movie.
Well,
and they come back and it's like this whole new thing.
Well, a lot of times, keep in mind, what they'll do is they'll have, a director will take, stock music or music he already has in hand and he says, okay, I want something like this, and use that, as a track guide.
Which is actually how Kubrick, that's how Blue Danube wound up in 2001, and Thus Spake Zarathustra, because they were originally just Kubrick's temp tracks, and then he decided, you know what, I'm just going to use it. I think it works better.
It worked like hell, that's for sure. I mean, and again, I think of Gainé Ballet and just watching the Discovery 1, just floating through space, and just the loneliness that you get a sense of there. Again, what else do you put in that place? I can't think of a thing.
And if it had been a proper score that was actually underlining the action, I don't think it would have worked as well. I mean, the fact that the music was sort of separate from the action is what reinforced it, is what made it feel, made it work so well.
Well, I don't know as I'd agree with that as it comes to atmospheres when they go into the psychedelic whatever have you. I mean, the atmospheres plays absolutely to the visual. It's on the screen, I think.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, definitely. Hey, Joe.
Hey, how's it going, Steve?
Welcome to the potty. We've been talking about movie music the whole time.
That's something that's I was just thinking about myself and totally not knowing
Really?
what you guys were. Well, because I was watching this thing that it was that LJ on YT posted of Yo-Yo Ma and this guy, I guess he's a Jukin dancer, and they did this thing together. And I mean, it brought tears to my eyes because it's just so amazing and beautiful the way he plays, and it made me think of other emotional music that I like stuff particularly like Jerry Goldsmith, and Williams and all that, John Williams, and like the main theme to Star Trek. Which one? First Contact.
Oh man, I was hoping you were going to say
theme, that one actually moves me emotionally, and
that is such a that main theme to First Contact is so beautiful.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, it's almost too beautiful for that movie.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to listen to that again. I've got it. I haven't listened to it in a long time.
Because it's First Contact is a really good Star Trek movie. I really like it. It's a great action movie, but it's like that opening theme is just so beautiful. It's like, wow, this isn't the rest of the movie at all.
Well, and especially because he does the same thing that John Williams does. That he makes it a theme, and then it's used in different ways in different versions throughout the movie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
the other theme, and I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was saying, and there's one. He does that movement or that piece is repeated like 6 times in the scene where the Vulcans actually land, but there's 2 in particular where it rises to this crescendo, and that just grabs me. I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
And then by pure contrast, you have the Borg theme, which is 100% threat.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Yeah, that's a good score.
It's really interesting to hear when a composer can do a theme and variation throughout the entire film, where it's like it's the same piece over and over again, but they're completely reworking it every time.
Yep.
So it kind of keeps drawing you back to what it was doing before, but now you get it a different feel in the particular scene.
Well, and a great example of what you're saying is the various ways that John Williams uses the Imperial March theme. Particularly, and my favorite is actually in the Attack of the Clones, which, whatever you think of that movie, again, near the end, when the clones are taking off, and you have all the clone ships, launching, and again it rises to this crescendo, and it's done in a way that had not been done, and there's just this staccato thing in the background, and and that just kind of blows me away. Or even Anakin's theme in Attack of the Clones is based on the Imperial March, but you don't know it until you really listen close. It's done in a different tempo and in different timing, but it's the same, musically it's the same notes, and you know, it's a guy, but somehow it's upbeat and uplifting. And how do you do that?
You know, speaking of great scores, you just reminded me, Joe, when you were talking about the Attack of the Clones score, and Jacob also, when you talk about how they make different use of the same musical phrase in Michael Giacchino's score for J.J. Abrams' first Star Trek movie, which again, sort of like what Joe just said about Attack of the Clones. I know not everybody likes that movie, but I love that score, and one of the things I love about it is that it makes such careful use of the classic Star Trek themes, because the Star Trek themes that we're familiar with, like the fanfare, the dun da 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 da, it only uses those just very sparingly. It's almost all original themes, and then like there's a scene where they're beaming down somewhere. You know, it's like Kirk and Spock are beaming off the ship for the first time together to go rescue Captain Pike. I think is when it happens, and you just get a little hint of the classic Star Trek phrase. You know, as they're beaming out, it's just dun da 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 da, and it's like, oh, that's just so perfect, because they're doing all this new stuff, and then they bring in the classic stuff just a little bit. And then for the closing titles, they do the whole Alexander Courage TV theme, you know, which I don't think has ever been used to that extent in any of the movies.
Except they only use half the theme. They don't. You know, they don't get the da 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 da. You know, they just take the last 8 bars and repeat it. Which it's always just that grates on me a little bit. But I mean, it's, you know, it still works.
Well, and, you know, and
having it all is really cool.
Yeah, and that's another one where I think the opening music is so beautiful that it's almost incongruous with the rest of the movie, because that opening scene of that first reboot Star Trek movie where Kirk's father dies in the ship is just heartbreaking. Like, that just gets me every time. And I thought, man, this is ballsy to do, like, oh, hey, we're going to do a new Star Trek movie, and it's going to be more like Star Wars, and it's going to be zippy and fun and action packed, and we're going to start with the terrible tragic death of Captain Kirk's father, and it's going to break your hearts, and it's going to make you cry. What do you think of that? And
then they turn around, and here's this punk kid Kirk taking out, you know, probably his dad's or his uncle's Corvette, and, you know, going balls to the wall and then dumping it off a cliff.
Yeah, and he has a Nokia phone, like Kirk would have a Nokia phone. But no, and yeah, just that opening and the music is what really makes that, because after you get past a certain point in that pre-credit sequence of Star Trek, it's all music. Or it's mostly music, and when you listen to it, whether you're watching the film or when you're listening just on the soundtrack, because that is one of the soundtracks that I have. That was another one where I was just like compulsively listening to it over and over again when I first heard it. It's just such a beautiful score, and it's like, is this from a Star Trek movie? Because it sounds like he was really just, like, Giacchino was really just composing his heart off, you know, just really going for it.
Well, look whose shoes he's got to follow in, especially, I mean, Horner and Goldsmith. And I can't think of who did 4, because 4 was actually very much off the beaten path in terms of what they did with that. But I mean, those were the two who really, you know, laid the groundwork. And yeah, I mean, I'll stipulate Giacchino did to the point where I'm probably going to have to pull out J.J. Abrams' Star Trek and just watch it for the score, because I don't have the soundtrack for that.
Giacchino is a pretty good composer. I mean, he's one of those who has sort of come into prominence in the last 5 or 10 years or so. He's been around for a little while, but he hasn't. I guess, you know, now that he's working with J.J. Abrams, and J.J. Abrams is doing all of these really high-profile projects, now he's coming more into prominence. But he's one of those film composers that is really sort of coming in to step up as, like, the James Horners and the John Williamses and the Danny Elfmans are starting to get a little older and age out and not work as much anymore. And you know, and he's a really, really strong composer, I think. And he has, like, a good ear for, like, popular stuff, you know. Like he has a good ear for a hook, but he can also really do some really beautiful stuff.
Was Star Trek 2, was that Horner or Goldsmith?
That was Horner.
Yeah, that was Horner.
2 and 3 were Horner.
Because that one was another one, right? Because I love the theme of it's the Khan attack theme, that warbling,
Yeah, stuff like that is very characteristic Horner. You start hearing, trills in a, da 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 da, which I remember from Brainstorm, and he also used it in Avatar. And I heard that, da 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 da, and I thought immediately, damn, that's Horner.
One of my favorite Horner's soundtracks is Sneakers, especially because of the Horner music and the great other music that they put in that movie.
Yeah, Horner did so much stuff. I mean, Horner was one of the most prolific composers. I mean, you would see him popping up, and just like Danny Elfman. Like there was in the '90s, it was like Danny Elfman was scoring like every third movie.
Right.
You'd be sitting in the theater and be music by Danny Elfman. Really? Seriously?
I just want to make a shout out for one other prolific composer before I walk off here. Mainly because I know Steve likes him, and all the other YouTubers that we work with is Kevin MacLeod. Mainly because this show I managed to sound design completely with Kevin MacLeod music.
Oh, Kevin MacLeod is like, I mean, if they had sainthood for non-religious purposes, like Kevin MacLeod should be, because I mean,
I actually wrote him.
He's like a natural resource.
Yes, and I sent him a note that I was doing this, and so thank him for making my job easier, because I'm not normally under this really specific requirement of royalty-free music, but I was this time, so it was like, and I just didn't realize how big his catalog was until I started looking at it.
Yeah. Well, Kevin MacLeod, the YouTuber's friend.
Well, what's really funny is there's a few charity commercials on television, and I recognized the pieces because I had either looked at them or used them in YouTube videos myself. But like, hey, wait a minute, I know that piece. But I actually wrote to him because there was this one piece I used to use a lot, and it's about 1 minute and 30 seconds or 2 minutes, and I love it, and I can't remember the name offhand, but I wanted it to be like 4 or 5 minutes, and I'm like, is there any way you could rework this to be 5 minutes? And he's like, trust me, you're not the first person to ask. And he says, I thought about it, and he says, I just couldn't work it out. And like, drag,
Yeah. I had to email him, I guess last year. Somebody DMCA'd one of my videos and claimed like a copyright claim on a Kevin MacLeod song.
Oh, come on.
And it was, so I wrote, just to make before I disputed it, like just to make absolutely sure, because the name was nobody I recognized, but I emailed Kevin, and we had never interacted before, and I just said, hey, somebody, made a copyright claim on a video of mine. It has a song of yours. It doesn't look like you. Like, is this somebody who represents you or something? And he said, no, it's a completely false claim. Dispute it, and and if you need any help, let me know. And I disputed it, and it was dropped, and everything went back to normal. But I thought it was really cool, because I know because everybody uses his music, and he must get so many requests and emails, and it was really, and he was so quick. Like, he got back to me within like an hour each time.
His IMDb page is humongous. Anyway, I gotta go, so thank you very much, guys. Talk to you later.
All right,
have a good care, Matthew.
Thank you.
I have a question. Does Kevin do anything for profit, or is he strictly?
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
I would think he'd have to, but
on his page he actually has there's royalty-free stuff, and then there's licensable stuff.
And I think you can also commission him for pieces too.
Yeah, I think that's actually.
I think he has like 10,000 entries or something like that. He's got a crazy number of songs, and he's in commercials and movies. He's all over the place.
I think he mostly works in like shorter pieces. I think my understanding was that he found that he could make a better living like scoring shorter stuff.
Well, I've definitely seen some pieces that are 8 or 9 minutes. I mean, he's definitely got some longer ones in there, but but yeah, you're right. Like, I've looked through some of his catalog, and a lot of them sit at like 1 to 3, some of that range.
Well, it just amazes me too because I mean, it's one thing if he was just doing this is just a piano or a keyboard or just a violin, but I mean, he's got, and it's not all electronic. I mean, he's got he's playing guitar, he's got drums, he's got all sorts of things. Like, damn, do you do everything?
He's got full orchestral. He does it all. He's good. Because of course I looked at him when I was looking at starting a YouTube channel as well, and then I just didn't because I was going to make it with someone else, and the whole thing fell through. But yeah, he's got just. I don't know. If I'm going to use someone, I'm going to use Kevin MacLeod.
Yeah, I mean, now that I've had a YouTube channel for a few years and I've made some connections, like I do know a few people who I guess if I asked them really nicely, they could do music for me. But I hate asking people to do that kind of stuff. And I mean, Kevin MacLeod is he's like a natural resource. You know,
I mean, he's a library.
Yeah. There's almost nothing that I don't think I've ever gone to his website looking for something without finding what I needed. You know, and you just look, okay, I need something for this. It needs to have this kind of a feel. It needs to sound like this. And I mean, sometimes it takes a while because he has this massive catalog. But I almost always will find something that suits my needs.
It is a little odd when you jump onto because there are several channels I've seen that have pieces that you have in your channel as well, like the accordion bit you had at the end of Now the Good News.
Yeah.
Or that chill boom boom boo doo doo boom boom boo doo doo. I've heard that in other pieces.
Yeah.
And it's weird because I'll watch something completely unrelated, like a YouTube theater type of thing where people are making plays with puppets, and then they'll just have that as the background music. I'm like, oh, that's weird. I expect to see a cat now and puppets.
there have been a couple of pieces that I have avoided using because Jason with a D uses them on Opinionville. And I think I forget what the last one was. I was looking for a new piece of music when I redid And Now the Good News after episode 200, and I changed the music and changed the format a little bit. And there was this one piece of music, I forget what it was, but it's a piece that Jason uses a lot as background music in Opinionville. And I thought, nah, I don't want to use it. Not because I'm sure a million other people use it already, so I wouldn't be doing anything wrong. But I just felt nah, I'll find something else. You know what I mean?
Well, it's
I hate to go ahead.
There was 3 pieces that Wagner had put together to make his theme way back in the day, and there was 2 of them that I was like, oh, I really want to use that. But I'm like, nah, it's just. And the thing is, I was going to use the whole piece as opposed to Wagner was just using a little section. I'm like, nah, it just feels like you're. It's one thing, I guess, if you didn't know the person, but you certainly feel like you're stepping on somebody's toes if you know them.
Yeah, it's like you're stealing even though you're not.
Yeah.
And people will accuse you of stealing. I've certainly, some of my podcasters I listen to have been like, yeah, this is just Kevin MacLeod music or GarageBand defaults or whatever, and people will be like, oh, that NPR show stole it from me. I was like, no, we were lazy.
Exactly. It's stock music, guys. Yeah, exactly. We stole it first.
And I hate to bring up a sore subject, but I can't help but notice that when DM2525 did that send-up of you as a part of that one video, I mean, Kevin MacLeod's music was under you. It just reinforced the whole business.
It's the soundtrack of our lives. Kevin MacLeod, it's the soundtrack of our lives. Yeah, I mean, everybody uses him. I don't know how you can do it. I think the only original song I've ever used in a video was last year when I had my buddy Jason Brené record The Parting Glass for when Jack McPherson moves out at the end of one of the Stephen Stuffy videos. And he recorded, I asked him to do it, and he recorded just this amazing, just beautiful cover, this really sad, melancholy version of The Parting Glass to underline when Jack McPherson is moving out. And again, it was one of those things where it's God, this is so beautiful. Do I really want to use this in my goofy, stuffed animal video?
Hey, sometimes you need contrast.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Well, that's what that makes it funnier because it's you have this serious music with the jaunty thing.
It's do we really care about this? Yeah, but the whole that's another thing. Because I mentioned earlier when we were talking about classical music and stuff. Like lately, I've been trying to write while listening to the Hamilton soundtrack, which is a terrible idea because I just get distracted. But Hamilton is another one of those things where like, it's like, how am I this emotionally involved in this? You know, like this is a show about, you know, the first Treasury Secretary, and I'm like about ready to cry. Like, how am I this emotionally involved in this story? You know, it's one of those incredible things where it's like, even if it's something that you go in thinking, oh, well, okay, what is this? Whatever, you know, like I think Roger Ebert used to say, it doesn't matter what a movie's about, it matters how it's about it. You know, like there's no such thing as a subject matter that can't be made into some kind of great art if you know exactly how to approach it, you know?
Well, obviously it made a connection because it distracts you enough to keep you from writing. So, I mean, as it comes to that, I would stay away from music with lyrics.
Yeah. Like Dave was saying earlier, I mean, some of it is my fault. Some of it is, you know, because writing, especially writing stuff like the 5 Things videos and the Facepalm 5 videos, you know, when I sit down, I have a general idea what it's going to be, but it's not like, oh, okay, fingers, you know, and it just pours out. Like, it does take some thought and some composition, but sometimes it's a little ridiculous. Like, sometimes I think, you know, it shouldn't be taking me like 12 hours to write, you know, like what turns out to be about 2,000 words. Because each script, my self-imposed word count for the scripts of each of those videos is 650 words. So altogether, it's under 2,000 words for all 3 scripts that I write every cycle, and you know, that shouldn't take me that long. So it's a combination of lazy and lack of inspiration and easily distracted.
Well, you know, it depends on exactly what the subject is. I've been writing a lot more lately myself, and some days. Because I'm writing like a small book, and some days I'll write 6,000 words, and then some days I'll spend the same amount of time and write 1,300. And it's just like, it's the scene, it's something I've like written before or similar to, or just my mood. You know, anything can just crush your ability to write at the speed you'd wish you could write at.
Yeah, well, and I mean, writing. Go ahead.
I was going to say, especially if whatever you write has emotion to it. I know, like, I haven't written poetry in a long time. I used to write quite a lot. And it was basically, I was going through a time in my life where I had a lot of ups and a lot of downs. And when I would get into one of those extremes, and it would just flow, it would just fall out of my head without I didn't even have to think about it. It just came.
Yeah.
And that was my best stuff. And then if I tried to just force myself to write, it was uninspired. If I didn't have the inspiration, it just, you know, you could tell. And so I basically hit a point where I said, you know what, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm just, you know, I'm not trying to, because I don't have to do it professionally, so I don't have to to force myself. So it just, if something occurs to me, then I let it spill out, and that's it.
Well,
Robert, go ahead, Lauren.
Thank you. I'm reminded of a Robert Heinlein quote, which I think came out of his thing, the Notebooks of Lazarus Long, and I've literally got it right in front of me here. If you happen to be one of the fretful minority who can do creative work, never force an idea. You'll abort it if you do. Be patient, and you'll give birth to it when the time is right. Learn to wait. I mean, it seems intuitively obvious, but it's, you know, it probably isn't.
It can be a little tough though, and like, because, you know, modern day, you know, people on the internet expect things now. If you're like a book writer and you just put out a book every year or something like that, then maybe that's fine. But me personally, what I write is stuff that I have to put out every week, and I'm in a situation where I have to force myself to write whether I want to or not. And I wish I could do like. I wish you could do what Joe was saying, and like when I'm emotional, take advantage of that, because you know you hear that all the time. You know, like, oh, this artist was always depressed, and they made their best work during their blue period. But God, when I'm in a terrible mood, I just don't want to write. It's just I'm like, I'm sad. That makes me hungry. I'm just gonna eat a bunch now.
that I can relate to.
Yeah. I mean, I try to contribute a blog a month to Atheist Nexus, and so far I've been managing it. And I mean, I've had some real splurges. I mean, in June I had 5 of them, and of course 2 of them were relating to the Reason Rally. But I mean, I am by no stretch of the imagination anywhere near what you, Brett, or Steve are about. I mean, I'm an engineer who learned to write. I learned to write technical manuals from reading Resnick and Halladay and Lees and Hendrickson and all these other technical books that I had to wade through in college, and then I learned to write fiction, courtesy of Robert Heinlein and Isaac Asimov and Robert Silverberg and Tom Clancy and these guys that I really enjoyed writing, and I sort of synthesized them and added myself and came up with Lauren Miller. So,
I'm laughing only because when you rattled off those technical writers, I'm like, I read a lot of the same. You read a lot of the same books.
Sorry, guys.
You were an engineering student, weren't you, Joe? I mean, Resnick and Halladay physics. I mean, that's the standard that I know of. And for me, Resnick and Halladay is literally back to 1968.
I think I still have mine.
Yeah, I know I still have mine, and I mean that is the basics physics Bible is those guys.
I have to say because you said you sometimes you have to try to do at least 1 a month, and sometimes you do 5 a month. One of the things that was tough for me was to force myself to stick to my schedule. So even if I wrote 4 posts or chapters or whatever I'm doing, I would just only put 1 out there a week, just because I'm like, if I pace myself, with the output, then I don't feel like, now I have nothing this week, and I just have nothing to throw out there. You kind of have to learn to reel yourself back. Like, I'm enthusiastic now, but reel it in.
I know. I went through that when I was moving into doing my YouTube channel, like, as a full-time thing, because when I first started doing it, it was like I would shoot a video and I would edit it and I would just put it up, and whenever it was done, I would just put it out there. And then when I started moving into, maybe I want to take this a little more seriously, I had to get myself on a schedule. And now it's completely different. Now it's like I shoot a video on Friday, goes up Monday. I shoot a video Monday, it goes up Tuesday. Like it's a very rigid schedule, and it really helps in a way, because I know I always have stuff. Like, I'm never in a position where it's like, oh shit, I need a video for tomorrow. What am I going to do? That hasn't happened to me for a very long time.
But it's adult, and it's responsible, and it's boring.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think everyone who finds themselves in a position where they have to write, like it's their job or they have some kind of commitment or whatever, you go through that period of disillusionment where you realize that it's not always going to be like an act of pure creativity. Where you're going to have to sit down and force yourself to write something because you need to write something by this date. And once you get through that disillusionment, it gets a little easier. But I think because when I was writing in high school, and even a little bit when I was getting back into it, when I was taking like creative writing classes in college, it was like, oh, this is great. It's this creativity. I have so many ideas, and they're just pouring out of me, and it's awesome. And then you get into that situation where, like, shit, I need to write something for tomorrow. Oh my god, I have no idea what I'm going to write. And you have to force yourself to do it, and it's not fun, and it's not easy, and it feels like work. And then you have to remind yourself, or at least I do, hey, wait a minute. I mean, I could be doing actual work. It's not exactly coal mining. Like writing stuff. It's really challenging. It's really hard. It's demanding in many ways, but it could be a lot worse.
Yeah. I've been especially motivated recently because my older brother, whom I love and respect, in fact, I'm living in his house now. You may be able to tell from the new background of my shot. But he just recently went to full-time writing as his job.
Wow,
great.
And I'll tell you this: he just made the transition, and he started February of this year. So in about 6 months, he started making more than he was already making at his job.
Wow.
And I was like, that's a huge motivation for him. Like, holy shit! Like it didn't take him any time at all. Since February, so it's August now. It's almost September, so it's almost 7 months. He's put out almost 40 short stories, like 5,000 word long stories.
That's great.
So yeah, I mean, like, that is, what the hell is that? 200,000 words or something like that he's published, and he's just pulling in money. I'm like, shit, now I got to do it too. I have no excuse to not.
Well, see, the thing is, like, I've been trying to ease back into YouTube, and I've been wanting to do what Steve does, is how he has that regular schedule, because I think for two reasons. One, I do think that getting yourself on some sort of regular thing, it does keep your motivation up, because I can get distracted very easily. But also, I think for the audience, because with Steve, okay, it's every other, it's going to be the off Monday ramble, and this day is going to be this, and this day is going to be that. So it's something as a viewer you look forward to, and especially with any YouTuber, you're going to like certain things they do. You may not like certain things. So for people who like a certain segment, they know, okay, I can ignore Steve Tuesday and Thursday, but on Friday I'm there because that's going to be the thing I like. And I see like him and another great YouTuber I love, the Mighty Jingles, who does gaming videos. The same thing. He's on a thing. So he doesn't do a video Sunday, but Monday he's got the Mingles with Jingles, where he just kind of riffs about what's going on and plans for the next week and so forth and so on. And then so when he's got certain games going, like for a while every Saturday was XCOM 2 video, and I think it really helps to build the audience, because I found that when I was making videos often, at least on a semi-regular basis, it helped grow the channel. But when you make them infrequently, particularly with the way the algorithm works, you just get lost in the shuffle, and you just don't get the kind of views and attention that you could have gotten if you're on a regular schedule.
It's interesting, because I used to read webcomics very, very frequently, and there are some people who do like podcasts and talks about webcomics and talk about how to do them. And one of the things they said is basically, hey, if you have a schedule, let's say it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you have to do that every single Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Like, you slowly will build viewers. And if you miss one Monday, by the time you post Wednesday, you'll have lost like 40% of your viewership, like that. And it's like, holy shit. You miss one day and people completely lose interest. They're like, oh yeah, he's not updating and I'm gone.
Yeah, well, that's one of
the thing.
That's one of the pitfalls of making content available so easily on the internet, is because people do, a lot of times when people won't just miss Monday, the people just stop doing it, like without warning. Like you'll go on Monday to see the new issue of your favorite webcomic, and it's not there, and it might be because whoever was doing it just decided to stop doing it. So a lot of people who see something like that, like if you miss Monday and you come back on Wednesday and you find that half your audience is gone, it's because they thought you were done. They're like, oh, he does one every Monday, and now there's not one. Oh shit, I guess he's not doing it anymore. See ya.
Well, especially too, because I found that when people go from doing something consistently and then they get less consistent about it, they're more likely to then end up dropping it soon. So it's kind of like when someone goes away from YouTube for a while, then they come back, oh, I'm back, and then they kind of pity pat, and then people get whatever, and they just kind of lose. They just don't have the. They just figure you're not really going to do anything serious.
Like the momentum's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. In my case with Atheist Nexus, I've been a member since 2009, and I've really loved it because it's an atheists-only environment, which is nice because, I did my thing with arguing with people, and it may have had some side effect, but, just being able to talk with other people, like-minded people, number one, really has, I think, a positive influence, and it also, can develop nuances and details and things you never would have thought of within the atheist mindset, and I think that is productive too. Again, my thing is, I try to produce like one blog a month, because again, I'm, my muse, sleeps on days that ends in Y, so I got to kick her every so often. Say, hey, come on, I need an idea, come on. But the thing is, in addition to the blogs, there are other people writing, discussions and articles and putting up stuff, and there's comments on that, which keeps the conversation going. But in my case, it's really more to support Atheist Nexus, because I think it's worth supporting. And there's a core of us. There's probably like a half a dozen or 8 or 9 of us who are constantly contributing to it. But it's. How many people are actually reading and not contributing? I don't have the slightest idea, but I think it's worth, I think it's worth supporting, and I've been enjoying it now for 7 years, and I hope to enjoy it for considerable time more. Question is whether or not, I mean, I'm still going to be able to come up with ideas for blogs.
Yeah. I've been trying to work on a blog of my own, but I think I've maybe trying too hard, because what I've been doing was, one of my main themes was to try to do like my own version of an Atheist Read series. But I've been going after the Answers in Genesis book, Demolishing Contradictions. And I didn't realize how much work that was going to be. Well, seriously, like, one of my first posts, it was like a 2-sentence argument from them that took me like 3 pages to tell them all that was wrong with 2 sentences.
Yeah.
And, well, part of it was just like, I'm trying to be very scholarly rigorous with it, because I want to show them just how fucking terrible they're being towards scholarship. But it's also like, I have to track down all the verses in question, figure out what the appropriate context is, look at the scholarship that's written on this in the past, and try to get it all cited, and that's just been like a hell of a lot more work than it feels like it's really worth.
Yeah. You know, the hell of it is, to me, that is a corollary of something I've held for a long time, and that's belief is easy. Knowledge, is a discipline, and that's hard. And it's something I think we're going to run up against again and again, because we've taken the rougher road. We absolutely have.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, and that's one of the problems, in not only with dealing with religious fundamentalists, but pseudoscience people. Because we deal with a lot of them, particularly on the left. We have our own, anti-science, pseudoscience people, and it's very difficult, because when someone believes that all the actual credible sources of information are suspect, or you have people who are willing to accept stuff like, well, it's true for me. How do you deal with it? You cannot convince someone like that, because they basically have built up multiple layers of insulation from reality.
That's why I typically prefer to argue with people more like us. That's why I think a lot of atheists like arguing with other atheists, is because you don't have to bulldoze that wall of bullshit to get to the actual argument you want to get to. You don't have to be like, okay, well, let's define what belief is to start. Okay. It's like, no, you can just move directly to the context of the argument.
Yeah. One of my favorite, I guess you'd call it like a red flag, or like a warning sign that you're about to be taking part in a conversation that's going to be mostly bullshit is, and I've encountered this a few times in the apologetics books in the Atheist Read series, and I think I encountered it in the one I just finished, in Search of God, where they begin a conversation, or that you ask a question and you say, what about this claim? Like, what do you have? What evidence do you have that such and such is true? And they come back with, well, let's talk about what truth is. Like, oh God, we have to do this.
Eschew obfuscation.
we have to go back to like philosophy 101. Before we can talk about the actual issue, because
let's define obfuscation.
Or if you're talking about morality and you talk about good from the perspective of a person, and then you say, well, then we have to understand. Well, what's how can we figure out what's advantageous for a person, for a being? And it's like, that should be pretty basic, but that they're just obfuscating. They're just throwing up like, let's take that off track. Or I remember in my one interaction with Cy-Ten Bruggencate, I got him to stipulate at the beginning of our discussion that neither one of us was a hard solipsist, so that we weren't going to go down that route. So we both agreed that reality exists, and that we have some means, however flawed, to perceive it. So then at a certain point we're going, and then he tries to throw the solipsism thing at me, and I'm like, wait, no, sorry, you already stipulated that neither one of us is solipsist. You can't throw that at either. You can't hide behind it, nor can you tar me with it. So
does he have a game outside of that solipsistic argument?
Not really, no.
Not that I've ever seen.
No, and Matt Dillahunty called him on it so solidly when they actually did debate that. I mean, Cy shouldn't be able to show his face in public anymore, but I mean, he will anyway, and we all know it.
He was at the Reason Rally. I saw him walking around at the Reason Rally.
I thought, somebody mentioned that. It might have been you.
Oh, I'm saying that I'm sad that I didn't know that. I would have liked to have engaged him in person.
Yeah, he's taller in person than I thought he would be. For some reason, I always anticipated that he would be like this small little dude, but he's a tall dude.
You taller than me?
I didn't get close enough. I didn't get close enough to him to get an accurate measurement. Maybe you know what? Maybe he was just standing next to a short person, and he actually isn't that tall. But yeah, I mean, I don't think he does have an act other than that. I've never seen him. I mean, it always comes back around to the presuppositional stuff, which
you get him off script. If you get him off script, then he does everything he can to try to direct you back to the script, or he's quiet.
Yeah,
that's what was so like striking with that Matt Dillahunty debate, because I remember it's been a while since I've seen that debate, but I remember he would get to a certain point, and he still had time left, but he was like a one-trick pony. Like once he got to the end of his solipsistic argument, that was pretty much all he had, and he just kept repeating himself.
And the fact that Matt was able to pre-write several portions of the debate is the purest indicator I can think of yet to the fact that he is that Cy is a one-trick pony, and you know it's not even any real thought, you know, other than that business about he talking about fizzing about, you know, theism, and Matt Dillahunty is fizzing about atheism. And I still remember that the if you've ever seen the abbreviation of that debate, when somebody actually masked over fizzing, you know, Coke or Pepsi bottles on either side of the stage, was hilarious.
Yeah,
and that's one. And the way that Matt Griefton dismissed him is actually makes me angry at people like Michael Shermer and some of the other people who have tried to deal with William Lane Craig, because William Lane Craig is well, maybe he's a two-trick pony, but it's the same tricks over and over. And Matt demonstrates when you're, and that's the advantage of debating someone who debates a lot, because on the one hand they're prepared, but on the other hand you can be just as prepared if you spend time studying what their arguments and how they've dealt with counter arguments. And I see people debate William Lane Craig, and they do okay, but there's certain things I'm sitting there and thinking, well, you're not hitting his biggest weaknesses, as in his huge leaps that he just takes and just explains away. Like, well, I've gotten to the point where I've said that a God is possible, therefore it's my God, and he wants these things that I happen to know without providing any evidence, and they don't undercut those massive leaps that he's taking.
And the wonderfulness of the self-authenticating witness of the Holy Spirit, and every time I hear that one, I just want to gag.
See, he actually came to Dallas, which is pretty close to where I'm at, and I went to see him. I went to see him talk, and we got in a little bit of a back and forth, but you know, he probably got that. But I challenged him on that whole Holy Spirit thing. Like it seems like every time there's some type of, he was talking about the resurrection of Jesus, and it seems like every time there's some type of gap or somewhere that you know, somewhere where the reasoning could logically, you know, rationally go another way, he kind of inserts that Holy Spirit, and the witness of the Holy Spirit is what, you know, kind of builds that bridge. Or he appeals to a argument of God, it seems like, that he doesn't really have time to get to. When he argues about God, he appeals to resurrection, which he doesn't have time to get to in his debates sometimes either.
Yeah. So he basically he's assuming his conclusion in his premise, because of course he's using, because basically if you think about it, the Holy Spirit is God, so he's basically assuming God to prove God.
But he's also assuming a universal subjective experience, which in no way, shape, or form can anybody hope to corroborate or substantiate. To me, it's the height of insanity.
That's the biggest hole in these arguments, is that without going in with the presupposition of a God, you can't logically get to him. You have to at some point make that logical leap where it's like, well, I don't know what's here, now it's God, boom, it's problem solved. That's the only way it's possible, because it's nonsense.
Well, what I threw at Cy, and I actually got him to shut up for once, was that, you know,
we should buy you a T-shirt.
Yeah.
Hell, I'll buy him a beer.
He tried, when he was trying, one of the things when he was trying to throw that solipsistic thing at me about, you know, how do you know what you know kind of thing, And so he's basically saying, well, I'm making a presupposition, and I thought, well, here's the problem, Si. Yes, I am making the presupposition because again, we're not hard solipsists that reality exists and we have some means to perceive it. But in order to make his leap that that God has written things on his heart and all this kind of crap, you have to make the first presupposition the one that I'm making. So to throw that at me as if that's a weakness in my argument, no, you had to make that too in order to even be able to perceive a God or that God wrote anything into your heart, any of that. So
I heard someone once.
So I've got one presupposition and he's got two.
Right.
As I heard somebody once put it, we're just presupposing the toolbox to build the house. They're presupposing the entire house.
Yeah.
Oh, that's perfect. I like that.
I heard. I think it was actually on a show I was on. I think it was an episode of the New Covenant Group's show that I was on a couple years ago, and Ozzy was on with me. Ozymandias Ramses II, and he went through a list of all of the presuppositions you have to make before you get to the supposedly first presupposition of the existence of God, and that to me is a really impressive rebuttal too. It's like, okay, before you presume that God exists, you have to presume that you exist, that reality exists, that your senses are reliable, that your brain is reliable, because these are all the things that you're using to interpret. Like if you read the Bible and you say the Bible is the Word of God and is infallible, you're also implicitly presuming that your perception of it is accurate. That you're reading the Bible as it truly is, that it's actually there, that it's not a hallucination, that you're not a brain in a vat. Like, there are all of these presuppositions that you have to have just bedrock before you make any kind of determination or any sort of judgment about anything outside your head. And to say that the first one is well, God has to exist. Like you have to make at least a couple of presuppositions before you even get that far.
And the very fact that the Bible has so many different interpretations to it, never mind so many different versions of it, I mean, how can you have a consistent universal presupposition on a document that is as badly variations on a theme as the music we were talking about at the beginning of this business?
Yeah. I had an insight about religious texts the other day, and I'll share this, and we can talk about it for a second, and then I'll wrap this up because we've gone over the hour, and it's time to bring this train into the station. But I know. The next show is going to be so pissed. Oh wait, there is no next show. But I had the thought the other week, and I'm going to try to work this into a video at some point because I think it's an interesting. It's just it to me clarified some things, because I often say, like, there's no such thing as a correct interpretation of a religious text, or at least there's no such thing as like one correct interpretation, because the people over here in this church say this is what the Bible says, and the people over in this church say the Bible says this, and they don't agree, and you can't ever reconcile it, because how can you prove which one is right? And it's not just the interpretation of what the text says, because there's going to be disagreement on that from time to time. People will say it says this and it actually says that. But with a religious text, there's an extra layer, because you're not just reading the book and saying, what does this mean? What do these words mean? You're also saying, what do I have to do as a result of it? When it's a religious text and you're a believer, you feel like the book is telling you to do something, or is imposing some kind of requirement on you. If you're a Christian, you are called to live a certain way or to do certain things. If you're a Muslim, you're required to live a certain way, to do certain things, to observe certain observances, and that will vary wildly as well. So it's not just what does it say, it's what is it telling you that you have to do that
Yeah, you're talking about the Bible very much as an instruction manual, but the problem is you can have an instruction manual that says put tab A in slot B, which is pretty unambiguous.
Yeah.
Or you can have the Bible, which again is subject to so many different interpretations and interpolations and permutations, combinations, and masturbations that.
And Lauren, you just hit on something I was about to say, is that it's kind of the difference between what does it say and what does it mean, because
yeah.
Well, again, tab A and slot B is pretty straightforward. I mean, I've written my share of how-to things, how to install this option in this system, how to write a program to have this effect, and it's very much step by step, and it's unambiguous. And the problem with the Bible is not only is it badly ambiguous in places, it is also self-contradictory. And again, I'm always falling back on the Genesis 1 versus Genesis 2, which I think is one of the best smoking guns in the whole business as it comes to that.
It's not a great way to start, to have two contradictory stories.
And the apology for it isn't very good either.
I've heard too that the argument that that is one of Christianity and religion in general's advantages, that being able to, that because there are so many contradictions in the Bible and in other religious texts, you can kind of shift the lever wherever you want to, I guess, as it fits the role of authority you want to have in people's lives, or as it fits the particular way you want to live.
Exactly. I mean, it's all things to all people. You want to be a Bible of peace, you can have a Bible of peace. You want a Bible where you kick ass and kill everybody in sight, you can have that too. Quran's no different. I don't know as you could say the same for the Bhagavad Gita. Of course, the Bhagavad Gita is set in the middle of a war, but
well, that's why I always point out to people that are like, just say, fundamentalist Christians, but they're not as bad as, say, the Westboro Baptist Church, and they'll criticize the Westboro Baptist Church, and I'll point out that the Westboro Baptist Church is at least as biblical as the person I'm talking to.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's why I pick the douchier parts. That's it.
Well, that's why it gets on my nerves whenever anybody talks about religion in terms of true believers. Because I know it's like it's a rhetorical thing, and people say, like, if someone like is an extremist, is like a real super hardcore fundamentalist, they'll say, oh, he's a true believer, and we just sort of say that without thinking about it. But I don't like that phrase, because it implies that the extreme hardcore literalist of Orthodox interpretation is the right version.
Yeah. You just have to understand that they're Scottish. Their Scotsmen are more Scottish than yours. That's all.
This is why David Silverman said, and I'm in complete agreement with him, that all Christians are cafeteria Christians and all Muslims are cafeteria Muslims.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Because you choose what you like and you leave the rest.
I do know though that when I was a fundamentalist Christian, there were things that progressive Christians were telling me that I really wanted to do and really wanted to believe, but I felt, I don't know if but I felt in a lot of ways trapped. Like, okay, I want to believe that same-sex marriage is awesome, but when I read the Bible, this is what it says about it, so I can't, and that was one of the major reasons that pushed me towards that's one of the major things that pushed me towards deconversion is, it wasn't just that I was intentionally making a choice by myself, or at least it didn't feel that way. It also felt like, okay, this is what the text says. If this is what God's saying, I have to somehow, align myself with that.
Yeah.
And you have to ask yourself, where in the Bible does it say that same-sex marriage is awesome?
People have found ways, though. There's ways, I guess. I just didn't.
Yeah, there are readings of it. I mean, I'm glad I'm an atheist, because I don't have to contend with that extra layer. Like, I don't have to worry about what the Bible is, what requirements it's imposing on me, because as a non-believer, I don't think it's imposing anything on me. But I've heard, I know of moderate liberal Christians who have ways of reading, like those passages from Leviticus, for instance, make it come out as, oh, actually, it's not even talking about that. Don't worry about that.
Right.
And
or love thy neighbor trumps all. Either one.
Yeah. Or maybe they want to make a reference to David and Jonathan and that whole trip in the Old Testament.
There's also the whole Jesus threw away the old law part. So.
Exactly. Yeah, Jesus is hanging out with 12 guys, and the only woman there is Mary Magdalene, and she only on occasion. So.
Well, that's the reason why I do not understand. There's some atheists who, in their zeal to attack religious people, will kind of pin things on a believer that they don't believe. And then they'll say, if that person says, well, I don't believe that really heinous thing in whatever religious text we're referring to, it's, oh, no, well, you have to, or if you don't, you're bad. I'm like, no. This is what we want. We want them to go that way. Don't pick on them. Pick on the ones
but
believe that shit.
but again, that plays to the whole issue of cafeteria religionist, because you're going to choose that, but that, oh no, that was back in the day, or that was some other excuse why we don't acknowledge it. But again, if you can be all things to all people, are you anything to anyone?
Well, see, the way I look at it, Lauren, I agree with you, Lauren, but the way I look at it is we want them to transition out, and the best way to do that, if they're going to go through that phase of thinking really heinous stuff, to thinking, all right, I can still cling to my belief, but I can get rid of all the more heinous pieces, I'm a happy guy.
Yeah,
however it works.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. I mean, I think a couple of people have written about it lately, and I think Martin has written about it in his blogs. That like if the only thing we agree on is that God doesn't exist, and we disagree on everything else, we're probably not going to be friends. And but if we disagree that God exists, if you're a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew or whatever, but we agree on how that we should be doing more to lift up people in poverty or promote sexual equality or racial equality, or then what? I would much rather be standing next to you than standing next to the guy who I think is a huge asshole but happens to agree with me that there isn't a God.
Right. And that's not something I've always believed. I came out of religion red hot angry at at the time I was working on a project studying religion and studying Christianity, and I was trying to say that Christianity was somehow a reason for the social injustices that we experience. That didn't really quite work out. Or Christianity was a way kind of out of some of the social injustices that we experience, and that didn't quite work out at the time. And so because of a lot of my anger as far as that was concerned, I came out a really rabid anti-theist, like God has to go 100%, like. And I thought that most atheists were very social justice minded. I was a bit naive as far as that point is concerned. Yeah, I mean, I do think that all things being equal, it is better to get rid of that belief in God. I think that Christianity has really crippled, marginalized groups in some very disturbing ways. So I would like to disabuse people of that belief, but at the same time, over the last 2 or 3 months, a recent shift kind of came over me where I realized, just because you don't believe in God doesn't mean you're all of a sudden... The argument from disbelief in God to fighting for social justice, which I think is very important, is not a very smooth one. It's pretty rocky in the real world, I guess.
Yeah.
And so, well, Steve, do you know who Abby Normal 1 is?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I said years ago, back when Hey Ruka had put out her series of fairly obnoxious videos and became the darling of Stormfront.
Yeah.
I said I would rather live in a world full of Abby Normal 1s than be in a room with one Hey Ruka.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the place I've come to it is as long as you're not imposing your religious beliefs on other people and you're not using them as an excuse to mistreat people or to push, inequality and oppression and all that stuff. Like, I don't care what you believe. Yeah. I'm perfectly happy having a pluralistic society where we have Christians and Muslims and Jews and Hindus and miscellaneous and atheists and agnostics and whatever, as long as everybody's equal under the law and nobody's trying to force anybody to live by each other's rules, and everybody sort of is in agreement that we all have equal rights and we all have equal opportunities, and then honestly I don't care. Be as Christian as you want to be, as long as you're not trying to force it on other people, you're not using it as an excuse to harm people.
Have you always thought that way?
No. No. It's very similar. It's very similar to what you were saying, where like when I first embraced my identity as an atheist, it was much more anti-theist. You know, I mean, I was reading and listening to a lot of like Christopher Hitchens, and I still have lots of things about Hitchens that I really admire. But that was very much my attitude of, you know, we're atheists and we have to attack. We have to prove these religious people wrong, and we have to, you know, fight the good fight of reason. And you know, over the years, it dawned on me slowly that not all religious people are that unreasonable. And not all atheists are all that reasonable, and that if we agree on 85, 90% of things, and one of the things we disagree on is whether or not there's a God, but we agree on the role of government and how we should be helping marginalized people and lifting up people who need a hand, and you know, if we agree on stuff that I think is really important, but you think there's a God and I think there isn't one, what am I doing picking a fight with you? Like, why don't we work together on the stuff we agree on, and we'll talk about God over coffee or over a beer, and it will just be something that we have an argument about, but it won't be a big deal.
Yeah.
You know.
The problem with that is that atheism to so many, you know, Christians is just such a deal breaker that they can't get past it.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Well, and you know, when me and True Puka did our hangouts a couple weeks ago, that was a point that he brought up in terms of trying to do charity work, trying to network with like charities that were religiously founded, and people knowing that you're an atheist, a lot of them were just like, no thanks, you know. Or it's like the atheist group in Oklahoma that you know, tried to donate to a charity.
Muskogee, yes.
The Muskogee atheists, and they wouldn't accept the donation because they wanted to be credited as an atheist group, and you know, that just seems. Yeah, and there's not a whole lot you can do about that. If the Christian group or the religious group has that anti-atheist sentiment and attaches that stigma to you, I mean, that's not entirely the fault of atheists. I mean, that's a negative stereotype that atheists and non-believers have had to deal with forever. You know.
Well, plus, I kind of feel like part of it is almost like we can't accept their, you know, charity from atheists, because then that'll break the stereotype we would like to maintain.
Yeah.
That they don't give it charity.
14:1, you know, the fool says in his heart there is no God, and these guys are just terrible, awful, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But if I accept charity from atheists, then somehow I have to break that, at least in a small degree. I have to say, well, maybe they're not all, you know, baby eaters or something, you know.
Speak for yourself, Joe. And pass the honey mustard.
I only eat kosher babies now.
But it's a health thing. I mean, it's, you know.
Yeah, not religious. It's, you know.
Yeah. Can you get vegan babies? I mean, come on, you know.
They're healthier.
They're so much better with bacon.
A little bit of hot sauce. Hot sauce.
The vegan babies a couple years ago were terrible, but they've got some really good ones out now. I mean, I think they're going out of pea protein. They're really good.
I prefer the rum-basted baby back ribs.
Barbecue sauce.
Oh boy. Well, listen, I got to wrap this up, folks. I got to get out of here and go do something. But thanks to everybody for being here with me. Thanks for joining me for this once again. Thanks to all of you for watching. I thought this was a lot of fun. We talked about a lot of stuff. We even talked about atheism, which we don't always do.
And Kevin MacLeod.
And Kevin MacLeod. So if you enjoyed this and you want to get in on the fun and have a chance to join in one of these hangouts, only Patreon patrons of mine can actually join me in the room here. If you are not a patron and you're thinking about becoming one, you think I'm worth it, worth $1 a month, $5 a month, whatever you can afford, you can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron of this channel. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks all you guys for joining me, and we'll do this again next month. Bye everybody.
See you later.